What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another show. Today we're going to be reviewing the legal after effects of this. 100% crazy. So, Attorney Tom here, this is YouTube channel. If you guys want to check him out, he's absolutely hilarious and you leave there feeling a lot smarter than you started. So, with no more further ado, let's get into it.
What's going on, y'all? Attorney Tom here. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to Audit the Audits video titled, "This may be the largest lawsuit ever filed against the cops."
After 7:30 p.m. on Friday, September 16, 2022, 20-year-old TSA agent Yareni Rios Gonzalez was pulled over just north of Platteville, Colorado by an unidentified officer from the Platteville Police Department. The officers were responding to a call regarding a potential road rage incident involving a firearm. Ms. Rios Gonzalez stopped her vehicle just past a set of railroad tracks, and the Platteville officer parked his vehicle behind her on the tracks. All three officers exited their vehicles and began to shout orders at Ms. Rios Gonzalez.
So, if you've watched any of my past videos about police breakdowns before, you know that the police officers can only pull you over if they have reasonable suspicion, and they can only arrest you if they have probable cause. And what a lot of y'all are probably thinking is, where's the reasonable suspicion here? How can they pull her over? Well, generally, if somebody calls the police and alleges they witnessed or were the victims of a crime, and they were able to provide some sort of identification markers that are accurate and the source is credible, or at least the police officers believe it to be credible, that is probably reasonable suspicion. For instance, if I'm driving and a woman in a black Ford F-150 and I get into a road rage altercation and she waves a firearm at me, and I call the police and I say, "Hey police, there's a black Ford F-150 with a woman driver, license plate number 12345. They waved a gun at me." Well, I describe the car, I describe the driver. If the police then identify that car with the same license plate and number and make and model, that's probably reasonable suspicion for them to be pulled over. But the
Listen, guys, don't take this as legal advice. If you get pulled over, don't ask them for anything about no reasonable suspicion. They ask you for your license, you give it to them. Don't end up on the news.
key to all of that is, if you get pulled over under just reasonable suspicion, you can only be temporarily detained while they determine whether or not a crime was committed or is in the process of being committed. They
You're guilty. Just do what they say.
cannot hold you indefinitely.
Put both hands out the window. Both hands out.
Dispatch Lipton 346, we're getting commands. Her hands are out the window at this time.
Just set your phone down at the edge of your truck.
On your left.
You don't need it. You can leave it on. Come on back. Keep coming back. Keep your hands up. Keep coming back. Keep coming back to the sound of my voice. Stop right there. Get down on one knee and then the other.
I got cuffs.
Go ahead.
Good?
See? They're doing this one of their
Keep your
own.
hands above your head.
Don't move.
Yeah, TSA, you're part of it.
What's going on? Why am I being...
You're getting arrested.
We'll explain everything in a second.
Okay, so she is not under arrest. She is being temporarily detained for
For everybody else, you're in handcuffs. You're arrested. Can I leave? No.
the purpose of determining whether or not they have probable cause to then potentially arrest her. Now, while it is extremely uncomfortable and unfortunate, the police officers instantly resort to using guns and pointing guns at her while pulling her over. But the nature of the call that they got, they said that there was a firearm involved. So while unfortunate, nothing necessarily really offends me about the arresting process so far, except for one glaringly obvious thing that I think I know where this video is going.
What's going on? Ma'am, what's going on? I'll tell you in a second. Take a seat. I'm so confused. Can I get my cell phone? I will get your cell phone for you. Take a seat.
The female officer handcuffs Ms. Rios Gonzalez and places her in the back seat of the police cruiser that is parked on the train tracks. Under Section 42-4-1204
Oh my God, I know where this is going.
of the Colorado
And just keep in mind now, they get the gun. They get the gun. All right.
Colorado Revised Statutes, quote, "No person shall stop, stand, or park a vehicle, except when necessary to avoid conflict with other traffic or in compliance with the directions of a police officer or an official traffic control device on any railroad tracks. Any person who violates any provision of this section commits a Class B traffic infraction."
And also, common sense.
Despite this, Section 42-4-108 of the
I concur.
Colorado Revised Statutes provides that, quote, "The driver of an authorized emergency vehicle, when responding to an emergency call, or when in pursuit of an actual or suspected violator of the law, may park or stand, irrespective of the provisions of this title. However, the statute also includes a
You know what's not funny about that? I guaranteed if they came up behind her and saw that she was parked on those train tracks, they'd give her a ticket. Guaranteed.
caveat that, quote, "The provisions of this section shall not relieve the driver of an authorized emergency vehicle from the duty to drive with due regard for the safety of all persons, nor shall such provisions protect the driver from the consequences of such driver's reckless disregard for the safety of others."
So,
I see a car seat. Clear. Okay, let's get the bed. Come across. Clear. Dispatch Lipton 348. Vehicle's clear. You can raise the channel.
It took her a long time to pull over.
I got a holster right here in the passenger seat.
It took her a very long time to pull over.
I'm going.
Did you see her toss anything?
She could have, because it took her a long time to pull over.
As Ms. Rios-Gonzalez remains handcuffed and locked in the back of the unattended cruiser, the officers search her vehicle for a firearm, without taking any actions to ensure her safety despite her vulnerable position on the train track.
okay, so as many of y'all know, in the real world, I'm a catastrophic personal injury lawyer. So there's a difference between just ordinary negligence, which you would file under the applicable tort claim statute of that particular state, if that state has one, meaning you have to jump through the additional hoops. But if you have to file under a 1983 claim, there are going to be some additional standards. For instance, it's not just ordinary negligence. The standard is conscious indifference, meaning you can pretty much only prevail on a civil claim against the individual or department that used excessive force on you if you can prove that the officers basically acted with conscious indifference, so much indifference that, it's like they literally were going out of their way to not care about the safety of that person. That is different than intent. That doesn't mean they intentionally tried to harm the person. It's lower than that, but
Wow. This is unbelievable. How did you know all that stuff?
I did my research.
pretty good.
Their channel I watch as well. And again, you leave there a lot smarter than you got.
Nevertheless, the Supreme Court concluded in the 1989 case of DeShaney versus Winnebago County Department of Social Services that, as a general matter, the Due Process Clause does not create a state duty to protect an individual against injury caused by a third party. However, the court also noted that, quote, "When the state takes a person into its custody and holds him there against his will, the Constitution imposes upon it a corresponding duty to assume some responsibility for his safety and general well-being."
Which means if we lock you up and you get ran over by a train, we're also responsible. Period.
The court further explained that, quote, "The affirmative duty to protect arises from the limitation."
I did my research.
It's impressive.
The court therefore concluded that, quote, "An official acts with deliberate indifference if its conduct disregards a known or obvious risk that is very likely to result in the violation of a prisoner's constitutional rights."
Hey, y'all, let's go through a mental exercise together. What do y'all think an obvious risk of temporarily detaining somebody, putting them in an unattended cop car that is parked on a railroad track?
I'm gonna let you guys take a moment and put your comments down below. What could possibly go wrong? I don't see it.
You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna say getting
That sounds-
hit by a train.
I hadn't thought about that.
this risk that is very likely to result in the violation of a prisoner's constitutional rights. In this situation, there is a strong argument that leaving Ms. Rios Gonzalez in the back of a police cruiser parked on train tracks would satisfy the deliberate indifference standard, because
Strong argument is an understatement.
the officers
I agree
demonstrated
on that
a
one.
total disregard for the obvious danger posed by parking on railroad tracks. However, as we will discuss momentarily, it is also possible that a court could conclude that a different legal standard should be applied to this situation.
She could have, because when I was behind her, she was driving slow enough,
Yeah?
so she could have tossed something, but I literally...
Toss it out the window?
She could have, out that window, but...
So you guys hear that too, right? There's a train coming. Everybody knows that sound.
Who is that car?
No, that's
Maybe a car!
Common track. Oh my god. Oh my god. Status medical emergent. The suspect was in the vehicle that was hit by the train.
Okay, so before we continue going down the civil lawsuit analysis, which is something this victim can control, let's talk about something that she can't control. Criminal charges. The state absolutely should fire and charge every single one of those police officers. You cannot tell me that this is not reckless endangerment at the very least. Had she died, which she didn't, thank goodness, this would be manslaughter. This is so reckless.
When you hear the damages, I guarantee you there's a couple of people who'd rather have been killed
By them. And the problem is, they would have no problem charging somebody else. Let's just say a parent parked their car, God forbid, and left their kid on the railroad track.
This is always one of those interesting situations where I always say to myself, I feel like police officers are held to a lower standard than the citizens. But I believe personally that the police officers are expected to know the law a lot more than those citizens because, you know, they're the ones enforcing them. Law enforcement. So if you're the one messing up, how can you judge me?
You see charges like that get brought all the time. This
Come on, Tom.
This makes me very upset.
As we discussed earlier in this episode, the Due Process Clause of the Constitution prohibits officers from taking actions that demonstrate deliberate indifference towards the well-being of individuals they have taken into custody. However, in the 2014 case of Walton versus Gomez, the 10th Circuit specified that while, quote, the 14th Amendment governs any claim of excessive force brought by a pretrial detainee who has had a judicial determination of probable cause as a prerequisite to the extended restraint of his liberty following arrest, the 4th Amendment, not the 14th, governs excessive force claims arising from, quote, treatment of an arrestee detained without a warrant and prior to any probable cause hearing.
Interesting. So under that case law, the 4th Amendment would govern and there might be a different standard.
According to the 10th Circuit in the 2019 case of McCowan versus Morales, quote, a Fourth Amendment excessive force claim is governed by a purely objective standard. A police officer violates an arrestee's Fourth Amendment right to be free from excessive force during an arrest if the officer's actions were not objectively reasonable.
Okay, so now we have a new standard, objectively reasonable, but to me it doesn't matter. Even if we have to go to the heightened standard under the 14th Amendment, deliberate indifference, that is deliberate indifference. How do you park on a railroad track? And if we're going to talk about the low...
No, it goes further. How do you park on a railroad track, put somebody in the car, hear the horns honking, but you're too busy trying to send a person to jail?
Lower standard, objective. Do you think it's objectively reasonable to park on a railroad track? Okay, y'all, so let's work through the damages for just 1 second. I'm fairly confident that they will be able
And this is the part that I find interesting.
to prevail on liability on this case. So now what is this case worth? Well, let's first talk about the economic damages. The video tells us that the victim has a long road recovery ahead of her. So she likely cannot work for a very long time. So that would be the economic damages and any hospital bills and things like that. Physical, tangible bills that she's going to incur in the course and scope of her recovery and her loss of work. Now, let's talk about the non-economic damages. Mental anguish. She was in a car, helpless,
She probably can't stand the sound of a train horn for the rest of her life.
watching a train come towards her. Her lawyer said that she was knocking on the door, screaming, trying to get somebody's attention. Can you imagine sitting in a car
Watching
waiting for
it come.
a train to hit you?
Mm.
Pain and suffering. How badly is she hurt? Spoiler alert, very badly. Loss
Multiple
of
broken
enjoyment
ribs.
of life. She is messed up and will be messed up for the rest of her life. This case, given the liability, is worth millions and millions and millions of dollars.
All right, guys. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. I don't know what to ask you to let me know. Just that was crazy. Comment on it, like it, subscribe, guys. Thank you for joining me in another video. Peace.